Hi there, this is Kyle, aka Null-Entity, and this is my video walkthrough / tutorial breakdown of Infeno of Guilt. I've been asked to do a video on the animations and my workflow and process now from quite a lot of people, and I'm ill, I will add, but at home, and just decided, what the hell, I'm going to try and do this, so here we go. Apologies if this is a little raw. And more to the point, I'm not going to go over every detail. I'm going to assume you know the basics or can muddle your way through Photoshop and After Effects. This is more workflow than anything else. So, we're going to go from how I managed to get from this picture to the animation which I recently uploaded. Obviously, this was a Lazor's entry for my Jabberwocky contest. He won, and I've animated it. So, first of all, he sent me a Photoshop file. I followed all the rules and requests wonderfully to have everything in different layers, and we've got, going back down to the backdrop, up to the gears, parts of the Jabberwocky, Alice's arm, and then her herself, and the knife in front, and his little signature down in the bottom corner there, excuse me, which was an absolute godsend. And after a day or two of editing, I came up with a lot more layers because I needed them. All the parts necessary to get this working. And that's actually the most troublesome part of the whole process, is taking a still picture and figuring what parts you're going to need. But for example, I ended up with sky, ground, a load of floating chains, rocks, the bridge between the two little floating castles, the gears, and all of these ended up as separate layers so I could animate them once I get them into After Effects itself. The Jabberwocky itself went from 2 layers to the tail, claw arm there, the entire arm, the same for the other arm and body. I was trying to find a head, there we go. The head, and then a slight blink animation to go over the top of that. The Vorpal blade ended as one item. All of that. Alice herself ended up an absolute load of layers. That many for the hair, and then some more. The front and back of the dress, which was a main question a lot of people asked, is how to get the legs moving in between the dress. And I will explain that when I get on to doing Alice inside the After Effects. And essentially consists of all these layers. We've got blink, we've got absolutely loads of hair layers, right arms, all the fingers and everything. So. But once I was finished with Photoshop, with absolutely everything that I figured I'd need, it was time to import the whole thing into After Effects. So we're going to have a look at this. Background first, then Alice, and then the Jabberwocky. Okay, so once inside of After Effects, starting with the background, create the rolling sky, and as a heads up now, the entire of the animation probably uses about 6 different tools. That's it. There is so little to it. I'm actually shocked at how much fun and how easy it is to go through. The sky is 3 layers of that. And if I zoom back out, we've got slight separate sides to it. That on the side there for the back, the slightly deeper background, and I've got 3 layers because I had to fade and attempt a loop between them so the whole animation loops, but other than that it could be just 1 layer for each. One like that, and then 1 over the top. Like that. And the whole of the background is simply animated with turbulent displace. And the moving of this little doohickey here, right across, and it just, when it actually animates, it just makes everything roll and move, and that's it. That's all the background is. I then, as we've got from the Photoshop file, got a bunch of chains, and each one of these chains has just a little tool on them called CC Bender. It takes these 2 little doohickey points, I have no idea what they are called, and will just, depending on your placement of them and the value that you give the amount, will just flex the picture. That's it. That's almost all the movement is on the chains. I ended up with a god-awful amount of chains, left and right of the picture, and they are just about 3 or 4 different versions of the chain picture, scaled, rotated slightly differently, and run through that. The only difference being some of the ones up on the right hand side, I can bring those up, too many layers here to see what I'm working with. These ones up on the right hand side also have a wave warp applied to them. If I can find them, there we go. The wave warp gives, as it sounds, that slight waving effect. If I up about there, give the slight waving effect. Undo it so it's a little more natural, as if the chains are blowing in the breeze. A lot of the other ones just did not need it. I tried and it didn't work out. My actual aim was to get a couple of them running down the length of the screen and background, as if they were running along a path, but strangely enough I couldn't figure out an effective way to cut it up and get them all following a path and running. And then there were the gears. I got asked whether they were particularly hard to animate, and to be honest they weren't. Single still image with the anchor point smack bang in the middle, and then I just put a rotation of 1 from 0 to 1 full rotation, or 2 in that case, but at least 1, and it will go around once, 2 times, 3 and so forth, and the speed was just set by the number of total rotations that I wanted, so they would just go round by themselves till rapture and the end of the universe. Excuse me, sorry, I'm slightly ill with this. Hopefully I can remove that. And that's it, they just go round and round and round. So the gears were really, really simple. And then there was the floating rocks in the background with the castles with all their chains and everything. Again, the chains were just on benders. The castles themselves were just still images again, moved up and down with puppet tool. That's on the bridge, but to give a slight bit of motion, and the same thing for the castle itself, so I could get a slight bit of movement down the bottom, and then starched the rest of the top so that the top stayed steady. And that's it. There's practically nothing involved other than that with those. More chains. And I think, add them all back in, it's the entire of the background covered, and the only tools I'm using are CC Bender, Turbulent Displace, and a couple of keyframe moves and rotations. And that's the entire background, running and moving and rotating as per the final animation. Okay, next part will be Alice and then the Jabberwocky. Okay, so now on to Alice. And if I run through the time frame here, we've got, ignore the random glitch little bits, they don't render out the final animation. As you can see, she consists of a good number of layers herself. We have a lot of hair, unlock all that lot. The hair itself, at one point I have found very, very irritating, somewhat annoying. The hair is normally a wave warp. The only issue with bringing a Photoshop file into Wave Warp, let me move this up here, is an entire Photoshop layer will be the entire size of the composition, that big bounding box. If you apply a Wave Warp to that, the entire bounding box gets the Wave Warp applied, and you can't pin any of the edges and it make any effect. Obviously what I've got is a tiny little piece of hair like that, and by having it exported to a PNG or another file, I can actually pin an edge. So say the hairline on her head will not move if I pin the right edge. If it were the whole layer, I couldn't do that. So that was one of the most annoying points of doing it. But again, she is umpteen layers of hair with Wave Warp applied. that, all just fingers, all just around the head, positioned in front, behind, and that's all the hair in the front. The ribbons are a wave warp with puppet tool. Little puppet points here, just so I can get a little more movement in the thing, and the wave warp adding more movement at the end, so just like that. That's all there is to the ribbon. The front and back of the dress, this with a point that a lot of people asked on. They're two separate layers with the legs sandwiched in between, and each front and back section has the exact same image size and settings applied to it, so they move exactly the same. I've got my usual wave warp with settings, and 2 CC benders applied, one for the back of the dress, so if I move that, it moves the back of the dress, and then one for the front, so that I could further enhance it blowing in the breeze. And I just copied and pasted all the settings for one right into the other one, and that's it. They move in perfect unison without separating and look like one solid piece sat in front and behind the legs. So that's all there is to that. The bow, a little bit of transparency on it, as you can see there, and was just parented to the upper body so that it moves with, as was all the head and the hair, all parented together. So if I move the upper body, if I can find it, I move the upper body, most of her moves with, because there was a little bit of rotation in that as well. The blinking of both her and the Jabberwocky are just several individual individual frames, a slightly more closed eye, flicked on and off inside for individual frames. Again, cut up body, very little in the way of settings, mostly just wave warp for all the hair, a couple of keyframe movements for the upper body. The arms, well, sorry, the left and right leg were, left and right leg were puppet tool. That out. Puppet tool so that I've got some control over the position of the legs, and that's it. Left and right were just done like that, and then the rest of the upper body was just keyframed to move with the legs. Back to more of the hair, again wave warp, CC bender and turbulence basically are my favourite tools. I've got a little bit of a bulge applied to the chest for the breathing. If I change the amount. Not that anyone's probably noticed it at all, but it's a wonderful little tool. Adding things like breathing and slight movements to the body. I think I used it on the Jabberwocky's nose as well when he exhales. And the right arm going in was just done separately. It was puppet tool on a couple of layers. The fingers were moved inside this composition, and then the whole composition itself had a puppet tool applied to it to add the bit of movement that you see. Just given a few keyframes back and forth for her reaching for the Vorpal. And that's it, everything tied to the body. Okay, and result being, as you've seen her in the animation. Next part will be the Jabberwocky. Okay, so last part now being the Jabberwocky, as we've got him here. Fairly simplistic. Tail, as it stands. Puppet tool again. And a CC bender. Oh, apologies, no, just the CC bender. I did try puppet tool at one point, add a little more motion, and that's it. I can just bend the tail back and forward. Sometimes ridiculously out of shape, and that's all it needed. That was tied to the body. The ground itself I wanted to cover because it was in front and behind the Jabberwocky depending on the parts of his body, and also had an orange solid that's just faded in and out so that when his body flares up and glows, glow effect, that's all it is. There's also a slight glow on the floor below him. If I up the transparency on that one, just a slight glow on the floor below him. And that's all that was needed for that. So I'll keep the ground, get rid of that. The claw, that was just tied to the arm. That made a couple of movements here and there. Again, that was just position and rotation, not even any additional settings, no puppet tool applied to that. That was then tied to the arm, parented to it. The arm itself, again, set up with puppet tool. Nothing more than that, just a bunch of points in puppet tool. That I can then move around, position the arm. All tied together, they move back and forward, and then masks applied so that the fingers are then masked out and invisible when they go into the gouges in the floor, looking like he's then just scraping earth. And that was how the arms were done. There was one little claw added to the other arm, which was just a couple of keyframes, rotation and position, so that it follows the hand and slightly opens and closes. No special tools there. And the body itself and the head were probably the most difficult or most time-consuming part of him. There's a puppet tool. We've got our points there. Ooh, whoops. We've got our points there, which allow me a little bit of movement in the body, namely just to rise and fall as he's breathing and or moving, just like that. And add a little bit of movement to the arm for the claw so that it moves. And then a glow for this, primarily this section of body here, so that it actually gets a little bit brighter as he flares up. The original idea was potentially to add smoke and flames coming off him, but somewhat Balrog style, but I couldn't figure out how to do it, so if I just play with the settings there, you can see. But I thought there was a little OTT, so it's just the ever so slightest of glow from there to there. And bar puppet tool and glow, that's all there was for his body. And then the head, as a composition, it had the eyes had a little bit of a wave warp on them, just to add a little bit of movement to the eyes. Don't know if you can quite see that if I get a little closer. There we go. Couple of individual frames again for the blink, shown and hidden, just transparencies. And then a glow applied to the top of the head, a little play with the threshold, just to go with the rest of the body for when that flares up. The head was then parented to the body, so that when that moves, it moves, and a little bit of rotation on it and that, just to make it a little more independent. And the last part, some particle effects masked off around the nose, so that he does eventually, when we get to it, give a little snort of smoke. Again, about the last thing that I did after deciding and coming to trouble with trying to add reeds of flame and smoke around his body, that it probably would not really be that beneficial. So, a little bit of smoke there, which shows up a little better on the final animation. And other than that, that is all there is to it. I've not used any real masterful skills, tools, not much that is not absolutely bog standard inside After Effects. And the end result Last part being just to drop the single layer for the Vorpal blade in, which does remind me actually, the Vorpal blade has a glint on it. The glint was created by using a plain white layer. If I find the glint, where is it? A plain white layer with Gaussian blur attached to it. Plain white layer with Gaussian blur attached to it, and then the same layer copied again and moved right into the middle just to give it that slightly shinier middle. The whole thing was then, you can see the curve there, was then sent curving over the Vorpal blade. It follows that line. Oh, if it would show up. There we go. It follows that line, and I've used the above Vorpal blade image as a mask so that it only shows up on the Vorpal blade, and then masked out part of the handle because I don't want it showing on that as well. And there we are. That's it. That is the entire animation. The whole thing's rendered out as an FLV and then dumped into Flash, and the music put to it. Get rid of the shapes. And there you have Infeno of Guilt. Probably about 4 or 5 days worth of work in total. Thank you very much for listening. Apologies for my voice and that. I'm absolutely stinkingly ill, and I hope you enjoyed this.